this little quote from Tom about the moon. He said, I have this feeling this is something far out, but I'm sitting here kind of going, okay. So you have this crazy advanced civilization that's been going on way longer than us and can create matter, manipulate matter, and do weird things. Maybe it's using the energies of a star. Maybe it's using antimatter energies to slam things together and to literally create matter. Can it create something like our moon and put our moon into orbit? And our moon is the only moon in the entire solar system that doesn't have an elliptical orbit, doesn't rotate the same way, and it has all these mysteries around it. And I'm kind of going, is that like a machine? Something cyclically keeps life ebbing and flowing over large eons of time because we're being used for some purpose? Yeah, some giant computer is sitting in that weird thing and it's just pointed at us. And anytime we think of a flying saucer, it shows us a flying saucer and it's a hologram. Anytime we sleep or die, it comes in, fucks around with our consciousness. That's kind of my new thing, because apparently, I heard on Coast to Coast one time, there's potentially a civilization that wrote down the time before the moon. They wrote their books or their petroglyphs on that. There was a time before the moon was here. And I'm like, well, who parked that shit up in our orbit? So I'm wondering if you want to get up there, figure out what's going on, and let me know.
What? God damn.
I love that. There's a fucking computer pointed at us. And they're keeping life ebbing and flowing because they're using us for something. I love it. Yeah, I think we covered everything in your article, and fucking looking forward to the next two that are coming out tomorrow. But yeah, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate how thankful I am for all of our Patreon subscribers.
What the hell does that feel like? I mean, you've come across this guy and the craft, and you how do you process that?
Well, I was scared. It definitely traumatized me a bit when I looked at him and I saw the big eyes, large eyes. That's when I started to really get fearful. If he hadn't started speaking, I probably would have, ran the other direction. But the UAP task force and David Grush had seen this, or were handed my account, and that's when everything started. And that's when I realized I did need to go forward, not just because of that, but I had also told David that there's a possibility that this program, might be doing some things that are, if this is first contact, they might get read in at the umbrella level, but you're not going to know what is actually going on in these places, in these laboratories. So I give Elon credit that yes, he's probably read in at a very high level, but if he knows any of the detail, I don't know. And besides that, I know that they have a cover story for the program for people that they don't want to know about the UFO stuff.
The following is a conversation with Jason Sands. Jason is a former US Air Force Master Sergeant and UFO whistleblower. During his 22-year service, Jason claims to have been exposed to the classified program known as The Program, dealing with non-human intelligence. In 1994, near Black Mountain, he had a life-changing encounter with a humanoid entity in a US military uniform. Now he's speaking out about what he witnessed, the discussions he's overheard about tall whites and greys, and the risks of coming forward. We also dive into disclosure today, what day 2 of a formal disclosure might look like, congressional hearings, his interactions with David Grush, and what he makes of Skywatcher and Jake Barber's crew. This was an awe-inspiring account from a truly fascinating man who is very relevant to the current UAP conversation. So, the following is a conversation with Jason Sands.
Jason, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate your time, and I appreciate you're busy. So, it's a good honour to speak to you. I wonder if it's okay, and I know that you've spoken a lot in the past on other podcasts and stuff about your experience, and don't get me wrong, I'd like to talk through that. But I'd like to get a bit of an idea of you as a person, really. Is that okay if we sort of jump in and start at your sort of childhood? What was your childhood like? Where did you grow up?
Fairly normal. Did have some strangeness. My mother and sister can attest to some of it. But there were a few instances of things that we couldn't explain, and visitations from people that nowadays both my mother and I both feel might have been some kind of other beings other than humans that were coming to see us from time to time. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's in my family. I think just like other people have claimed that, this is something that happened to me. It's followed our family around for a while, that kind of a thing. And, that's kind of what I feel about it as well.
Yeah. Okay, so at what point did you decide that you wanted to join the armed forces, to serve your country? At what stage did you sort of decide that was your path?
It was pretty soon after graduating high school. Had some jobs, moved from my dad's place in Massachusetts to my mother's place in California. Tried kind of making it out on my own, and it was going pretty slow. So I just decided, well, Air Force, I'd like to just prove to myself I could get out there and do it and achieve, retirement and everything else. And I got through it after 22 years. So I'm glad I stuck with it. It was a very good experience all around.
And so you were, am I right in thinking that you retired as a Master Sergeant? Is that right?
Yes, that's senior NCO, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's sort of jump forward a little bit, or jump back a little bit, I should say. At what point did you sort of become aware that the military, I guess, and the government had more information than we did on non-human intelligence, on the UFO UAP subject? At what point did you sort of realize, hang on a minute, there's something here, and they know more than that you perhaps did prior to that point?
Well, about halfway through my career, I ended up at Nellis Air Force Base, and within the first few months, I got picked up, handpicked to go into the program, and I spent 3 years in the program and learned quite a bit. But that's where I picked up a lot of the information that I had, and it was kind of in the middle, about my 10 years in.
The parts you need are a line
occurred.
printer
So
and an
I really
ID
got
card.
exposed to a lot of,
I'm sorry. Other clients
really
have left a mess here.
interesting things, both with what we're doing with technology, is the contact with other beings was also part of that experience. So yeah, that was, I'd say, right there around the 10-year mark in my Air Force career.
Okay. Are you able to say, was there talk of the program before you were in the program? So was there kind of whispers, were there rumors? In a big organization, I would imagine that there would be snippets of information that sort of makes its way to other people, or was it completely just until you were in the program? There was no whispers of it. You didn't hear anything, and
Yeah, there was nobody was on to us unless you got read in. So it was pretty much the commander, the the lead officer, who was a captain, and then it was us 4 enlisted folks that were the analysts for the team. And I think it'd be very hard to detect because we used the same equipment. We always went out for 2-week missions. And we also did all the regular work when we got back to the organization, and we just fit right in with all the rest of the crowd. And all they thought was just we'd been doing a couple of weeks mission that nobody told them about, and that I never said anything, and nobody else did either. So they never got any wiser to us. And that's the way they ran for years over there. So it's just one of those things where we just looked like normal people, coming and going. And then if anybody did ask a question, that officer who was the lead for our team, if somebody started asking, well, hey, where's Jason? He'd actually defend me and say, oh, he's working on a out-of-cycle mission. It's special, So just leave him alone. He'll be back in 2 weeks, and everybody will just back off. Because that happened a lot. Sometimes you get like these missions that were normal and regular missions that were out of cycle from your annual plan of all your different teams going out, and you get caught up in a couple of weeks of work for some other person, but it just kind of came out of nowhere, out of the blue. So nobody ever really batted an eyelash at it.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So let's fast forward a little bit then to the Nellis Air Force Base case, if that's okay. Are you able to sort of talk us through that? Obviously, that's quite a big case, and people are fairly well aware of that case, and I know there's some footage out there that's circulating. It's been there for a while. What was your involvement in that?
Well, I was out of the program by that time. I had gotten out of the program earlier in 1994, but later on that year in October, in the winter, that's when the encounter occurred. So this was just us driving up to work at Black Mountain, where we would conduct training for the air crews and get them to go through the rigor of training with radio interference and white noise, and still getting their bombs on target and get their mission completed. So that's what I was there for. That's what we did up at Black Mountain. So we're heading up for the day to go train some pilots. And that's when we ran into this person on the side of the road. And I think he's an extraterrestrial, because I stood no more than like 2 to 3 feet away from the guy, so I had a very good look at him. But to me, even after being in the program, this was what I would call an extraterrestrial kind of event. But yeah, he was stuck there on the range for the weekend, apparently trying to find some kind of material to repair his craft, because that's what he was asking me for, was some tritium, I think it was. And that's what he needed, and I didn't know what that was, and I told him that, no, the only thing I know is titanium, and he was like, no, that's not what I want, it's tritium. So when I couldn't fulfill his order to help repair his craft, he just walked off. He didn't really say goodbye or anything, got back in his craft, and then he flew away down to the south, the range. So it was a very strange day, definitely. I initially thought he was actually dying of hypothermia, because he had this bluish kind of a tint to his skin. He had very pale, like albino type skin, or a very pale person's skin, but it had this blue undertone. So it was very cold that day, and I thought he was dying of hypothermia, and that's why we stopped. And I thought I was going to be picking up somebody that was dying, of hypothermia, but it ended up he was just not even from this world, kind of an event.
And this communication, was this telepathically? This was non-verbal?
Part of it was audible as well, but when he spoke, it was not my language. It was not English. But I understood everything that he was saying. And when I think back at that time, when he was communicating, there was almost this emotional level meaning of the word that would arrive in my brain just before he would speak it, because as you know, your brain works faster than your mouth, and things like this. So there was a slight delay there between my understanding what he was about to say and then him saying it. So there was definitely some kind of telepathic link he was using to relay the meaning of all the words, even though it wasn't my language.
Am I right in thinking I've heard, I think you talk about before that sort of uniform was almost like a military, like an American military type of uniform. Is that right?
Yes, and that was a very strange part of the whole incident because, you know, he from a distance, he looked like one of us. You know, he had a military uniform on and everything. But then when I jumped out of the car to help him out, he was not human. So honestly, thinking back at that, I think perhaps he was working in the program, and maybe he had some kind of an altercation with somebody in the program or the security forces, and he took off in one of the craft, and somehow his craft got damaged on the way, and then he ended up meeting me, you know, later on, and asking for stuff to repair his craft. So I would imagine that'd be the only plausible thing that comes to my mind as to why he was wearing a uniform.
And so you saw the craft yourself with your own eyes.
Yes, it was just about 50 yards off the shoulder of the road, the dirt road. It was very clear. Yeah, you can see that.
Could you describe it? Could you describe what it looked like?
Yeah, it kind of had a rounded front end, like a helicopter's front end. You know, it has the big bulbous type front, not the ones with the sharp noses. And then on either side, instead of having landing pads, you know, that are on either side on the underneath, they actually ran it like ram's horns from the top all the way down to the bottom, and the end of the ram's horns on either side is what the craft would rest on when it was landed. And then there's one other piece where the back of the craft was. There was like an egg-shaped, flat, black, about 3 foot in diameter kind of egg shape that was sticking out. That if it was the tail end of the helicopter, that's where I would expect it to be, but there was no propellers or anything on the craft itself. So it looked very strange. You're talking to a guy that has seen literally hundreds of different types of craft, and not just our own inventory, but you're talking all our allies would come and get training on it at the Nellis test range. So I pretty much knew everything in the inventory, and this did not fit in any of those kinds of shapes.
What the hell does that feel like? I mean, you've come across this guy and the craft, and how do you process that?
Well, I was scared. It definitely traumatized me a bit when I looked at him and I saw the big eyes, large eyes. That's when I started to really get fearful. If he hadn't started speaking, I probably would have, ran the other direction. But because he started speaking to me, it kind of calmed me down. But ever since that event happened, I consider myself a Christian, and that I have faith, and it really rocked my world in that regard. Because at first I thought, well, shoot, how do I parse this with my belief system? Was one of the things that hit my, my mind for the first part of it, of trying to reconcile all this. And then eventually I realized, well, wait a minute, the Bible kind of says that there were, strange people that they called sons of God, and they actually came into, like, I think the story of Abraham, or that he had invited some sons of God in, and they actually had dinner with him.
And an ID
and then he
card.
has a baby that also becomes a big figure in the Bible. So I'm just thinking, well, maybe God has created many other beings. And then I started to remember all the scriptures, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, because in Genesis it mentions the seraphim, the cherubim. These are all different races, apparently, of angels. So I started thinking, well, maybe I just encountered the reality of these beings, and that's where I started parsing things together. And it also went along with, the fact that, God is love, kind of a thing. And honestly, when I was having that telepathic intercourse and communication, I did feel a lot of, care, respect, calmness, even love, I would say, kind of respect and civility that I did not have in my mind. His mind was definitely much more controlled than mine, and it does give you that sort of a spiritual, like, peacefulness while you're talking sometimes. And I felt that from him a few times while we were discussing things. And then all of a sudden he'd move and I'd get scared again, and my mind would go off over here, and I'd kind of break up the conversation. So I felt like a mess, while this guy was, this person I met, this extraterrestrial, was not at all scared, and I could tell he wasn't annoyed. He was just like, oh, here he goes again. He's losing his mind again. He's getting scared. I gotta wait for a minute, and then I get control of myself. So that's kind of how it went. But yeah, I definitely felt like he was much more organized with his mind and control. So that's something that's really lasted my whole life. I've always tried to aspire to be that controlled in thought and emotionally as well.
Yeah, interesting. So how does it? So you have that experience. You have that experience, and you're trying to process it.
Yeah.
Do you tell people about this? You've had this experience. Do you tell your superiors? Do you tell other people? Are you allowed to tell your sort of family? Because would that be classified at the time, or is that because it's
no?
not?
It wouldn't be classified. It was just strange. But you're talking the 1990s, 1980s. They could take your clearance and kick you out for any old reason, and being stupid about UFOs is one of the things everybody thought was like, oh, they'll kick you out for that. So yeah, everybody kind of kept their mouth shut about strange encounters uprange. So yeah, that's kind of how it went. I just kind of kept my mouth shut. Nobody wanted to talk about it after the event. Either they didn't see what happened because they were transfixed, because at one point I did look into the car with with all the fellow passengers, and they did look like they were entranced or something, that they weren't conscious. They were just kind of like, zombie. So either they didn't hear, see, or whatever, or just couldn't even function, and nobody talked about it. So I figured, well, I better just shut up too, and forget about this whole thing. So I did, and got on with my life.
Wow. So you got on with your life. You sort of kept it suppressed, I guess, in terms of sort of sharing the information. And then at some point you've decided, I'm going to come forward. At what point was that you made that decision to sort of share this experience?
Well, that was when I was working on the Top Secret Network. They have a forum that in those times, it was, or in those days, it was when the UAP Task Force was there, but not Arrow. The new Arrow office has not stood up yet. So this was that transitionary period, a couple of years before this all was turned over to Arrow. But I was on the forum, and somebody posted this event on that forum of this UFO coming onto the Nellis Test Range, because there's video of it. And you can go on the internet, and if you just put in the search bar, Nellis Test Range UFO incident of 1994, this will pop up. So you can see the craft I saw, because the previous week, that's when it came out onto the range. And it flew right by where the Black House schoolhouse where we were working. So there was another team of people that saw it from Black Mountain, and as it flew by. But if you want to see that, you can go out on the internet, like I said, and just look it up as the UFO incident at Nellis Test Range in 1994. So there's that. But anyway, on the forum, I'm mentioning this, or I'm seeing and reading all of this, because they're all just like, hey, did anybody see this? This is the old footage of a UFO, and it's on a military test range. And I'm like looking at it going, oh boy, there's more to this story, because I knew what happened the following week, and I'm like, gosh, I tossed and turned for a few weeks at least, and finally I just said, here you go. This is what happened the next week. And then everybody was like, holy crap. They're like, really? And they started asking me a lot of really tough questions, because there's, with any forum, you get the critics and you get the people that are accepting or open-minded. And, you get the whole gamut. The same thing happened with this. But the UAP Task Force and David Grush had seen this, or were handed my account. And that's when everything started. And that's when I realized I did need to go forward, not just because of that, but I had also told David that there's a possibility that this program, might be doing some things that are, if this is first contact, and if Roswell happened and we chopped up somebody's family members' bodies, we didn't treat them very nicely. So I'm thinking to myself, Dave, I do have concerns that at least these program people that did this to these bodies and desecrated their loved ones, this probably puts some people at risk because they may not like this and they may be, pretty pissed off, but maybe they're more civil at the same time, hopefully. And it appears they are more civil, but they haven't gone after anybody. But there is that real reality of it. And in fact, when I was on the mission, we did intercept a phone call that said exactly that they would be coming back because they wanted their equipment returned and the biologics returned. Just like we would if a Russian aircraft was downed on our soil. The respectable thing to do is to catalog the whole thing, get the bodies back to the family members. You treat everything with respect, But here we are with something that I think is even more important, is another civilization from another planet coming here, and here we are treating them like they're some kind of trash, or just something cool to pick up and just start playing with. So that's another reason why I came forward. Was I was just like, this can't be going well with that. So there's that, risk to some of the people I used to work with, to their lives. What I honestly came to, the conclusion of, and that's what I gave my testimony about, was this is, the urgent need. I'm saying you guys have got to get in there, and for God's sake, please at least do an evaluation on them, because if they have even a few leaders that are into this horrible treatment of these craft and these peoples that might be from another civilization, we're getting something totally backwards here. And I said, I'm not pissed off at them because they made decisions right at that World War II. At the end of World War II, that's when this all stood up, I believe. And yeah, there was a lot of fear about everything being Russian. Even your neighbors were commies and deserving of going to prison just because they said something strange at a dinner party. Just crazy stuff back then. So, maybe they made decisions and they made some mistakes, but it's time to go back and go and correct some of that. And I think that's not too much of a hard thing to do. Just come clean. We know you made some mistakes, and please, let's just get through this. So that's what I was pleading for Congress to do, was to go out there, assess this, and if there are still some bad things going on in the program, at least assess it and stop it, because we don't want anybody to go rogue and continue with this sort of maltreatment of whoever these recovered crafts owners are. Whether you want to believe they're extraterrestrial or not, I don't care, but these are not our craft, So whoever they were, they got chopped up. I don't like that, So we're not living back in the 1940s anymore and 50s. I think we're big people here and adults, and we think we can get through this. And it's not going to be as bad as they think it is.
So would I be right in thinking that you were one of David Grush's 40, I think he mentioned 40 whistleblowers or 40 people that he'd spoken to that are sort of directly?
Yeah, I don't know how many whistleblowers there actually are, whether I'm part of the 40 or 50 or 80, I don't know. All I know is he asked me to go forward to Congress, give my testimony, get my whistleblower protections and all that stuff through Congress. And I did. And I did that. And then Congress wanted me to take the next step and testify to AARO, which I did. Then they wanted me to also testify to the Inspector General, which I did. And then the last step to legally finish everything out was to do my pre-publication, because I knew I would have to start speaking publicly. And so that was the last legal step. So I got all my coverages within that time frame. But it took about a year for everything to transpire.
So you've jumped through a lot of hoops.
Yeah, I've been vetted, inspected, investigated by literally every law of the land. It kills me sometimes hearing from these guys online about what they think from their couch, and I'm like, dudes, you have no idea. You have, with all your criticisms, you have no idea what it's already been like. You guys cannot possibly done a better job investigating me and my credibility than all of these other people that have already looked at me. And it just kind of tickles me sometimes that they get so caught up in how righteous they feel about bagging on me about this or that. And I'm like, people, you have no idea what I've been through.
Yeah. I had this conversation actually with Richard Dolan a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Yesterday, in fact, and we were talking about, can you trust these ex-intelligence people? And it was, it was one of those questions, kind of playing devil's advocate. And